Hello and welcome to Forerunners, the Surfline podcast. This is the Atlantic version. I am lead forecaster Kirk Corte, and I'm joined here in our Nags Head, North Carolina office with forecaster Rob Mitzeifer. And we also have on the line Mike Watson from down in Florida. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing well down here. How you guys doing up there?
I hear it's a little bit warmer down there, Mike. It's in the mid 60s here in the Outer Banks, which really isn't that bad for early March, but I think it's a little bit warmer down there, isn't it?
It sure is. And as Kevin Wallace, our director of forecasting, alluded to, man, I had to shed the sleeves. So I'm coming to you sleeveless, and I know you guys will appreciate that.
Well, it really helps you type. You know what I mean? You're less encumbered. You can really do that fetch analysis without the bothersome part of having anything stopping those biceps. But then again, I heard you did just work out, so maybe they just ripped off. They just like burst.
Yeah, they did. We always end with the curls. Curls are for the girls. So yeah, we end that there, and it's 80 degrees and sunny here. It's pretty warm. So like they say, sun's out, guns out, man.
I would say that's the end of the podcast here, but we got a lot of stuff to talk about. We have a really interesting pattern setting up here, and actually it looks like some pretty widespread surf from the Gulf to parts of the East Coast and even eventually down in the Caribbean. So, Mike, why don't you break things down here for us and let us know kind of what we got happening as we head over the next week or so.
Yeah, absolutely, Kurt. We've already kicked out one cold front today, and right now we have our next storm of interest is currently developing along the Texas coast. We're going to see that slide along the northern Gulf Coast states before pushing offshore the southeast U.S. coast around Thursday evening into Friday before sliding under Nova Scotia out there over the weekend. And pretty interesting little system here. It is moving out there. We do have peak winds in that low expected to be around gale up to storm force, possibly some pockets of stronger winds. So really that's our next system of interest over the next couple of days. Following behind that's going to be strong high pressure building in over the U.S. coast as U.S. East Coast as well. So yeah, a lot of opportunity out there up and down the East Coast and down in the Caribbean next couple of days. But the first area that's going to really be impacted by that is going to be the Florida Gulf Coast region into the southeast U.S. and the Florida coast. Rob, what's going on down there? If I'm a surfer, what are the areas? What am I looking at? Where do I want to be and to target over the next several days?
Great question, Watson. So, the one thing I like to look at when we were talking about Gulf or East Coast surf, a lot of times our surf comes with weather. And as this low, like you said, it's going to skirt along the northern Gulf Coast tomorrow, which is Thursday. It's going to bring a lot of severe weather. So you're going to want to watch out for that. There's a lot of severe thunderstorm warning watches, as well as tornado watches, flash flood watches, really from Louisiana through Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. But as far as surf goes, the Panhandle does look a little bit interesting tomorrow as that low skirts by. They'll see some building southerly wind swell ahead of it. Behind it, looks like kind of the end of the day on Thursday, we'll see winds trend a bit more northwest, which will be favorable for those breaks around Pensacola, such as Pensacola Pier. I know guy Sterling Spencer is oftentimes putting up videos from there, and it always seems to kind of outperform, or at least what you'd expect in the Gulf. The Gulf deserves some love, and here there's definitely going to be some surf there tomorrow. Now, as that low kind of keeps pushing eastward, as you mentioned, West Florida's also got to get in on the mix there. So they're looking at Friday for some building northwest wind swell. That'll be coming down Saturday. Nothing really that great we're expecting, but definitely rideable surf.
Let me ask Mike. You spent a day or two over on the west coast of Florida. You see a northwest wind swell event like this. What does it get you thinking?
A lot of times it just depends on how strong the wind is. If I'm in the Pinellas County region, a lot of times we're going to tuck in at Sand Key behind the jetty. I tell you what, when I started growing up surfing there, you weren't allowed to surf there. But they opened that up. That offered up a.
Is that why you skimboarded? Sorry to interject.
Exactly. Yeah, skimboarding was huge on the Gulf, man. That's what we had to do a lot of times. If there was nothing to surf, man, we would ride waves any possible way that we could.
So ankle high is not actually flat then, huh?
Ankle high, we'll find something. Someone will find something to do with that.
I'll tell you what, with guns like that, you probably throw that board really hard, don't you? It's like,
yeah.
How do you catch up with it? You must be pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So but we're finding, a lot of times it's finding that wind protection. One thing Rob mentioned that's very interesting about the Panhandle up there. the surf there is quite a bit different than the West Florida region, and even over here on the East Coast. There's a lot of deep water out there. There's plenty of fetch for some of these systems to work with. So you get some really powerful swells over there and some really good shaped waves coming out of that deep water over that area. So I think that's a good point by Rob that you made there. And the Panhandle can get really, really good.
Yeah, I do think the Panhandle is kind of an under the radar kind of zone as far as the Gulf goes. Like, they just don't get a lot of press all the time. But let's kick this forward a little bit. So as this low kind of skirts off the southeast coast, we're going to see building surf in places like South Carolina, southern North Carolina by Thursday afternoon. And we're not looking at great conditions, but it might be worth watching the end of the day as winds may trend a little bit more northerly. However, on Friday, once that low skirts off, we'll have much better winds in the southeast. A little bit of leftover swell, nothing too big because, like we mentioned, that low is really not going to really get cranking too hard while it's close to them. It's really going to strengthen once it gets further off to the Northwest Atlantic, and we'll touch on what that's going to mean. But really, southeast, Friday morning looks like an okay window to target. Nothing too special, but definitely some surf.
Now, let me ask you, Rob, anytime I see these fronts come through, and especially any guys that live in the South Florida region, and we're looking at these and there's any potential of northwest winds, what are you thinking with this one? Is South Florida going to see much off of this one? We've seen a couple of events this year, like Super Bowl Sunday was a pretty fun event where we had a nice northwest wind behind a front, created some pretty fun waves down that way. What are things looking like behind this one?
Yeah, great question, Watson. So the thing that you actually mentioned this previously, that really strong high pressure that's going to build in behind this low, that's not going to be great because in an ideal situation for South Florida, we want those northwest winds to kind of stay northwest. And that could happen in a variety of different ways. But in this pattern, that's not going to actually happen. So we're going to see northwest winds quickly trend north and then northeast through the afternoon hours on Friday. So even though we will start to see some building surf in Florida and for South Florida too, end of the day Friday, it looks like our swell is not going to really outrun our unfavorable winds, if that makes sense. So realistically, once the surf does arrive in South Florida, conditions are really not looking that great. But, South Florida surfers, take what you can get. There will definitely be some waves to grab over the weekend.
Absolutely. And there's some spots up down that way that offer up some wind protection I think will be worth checking out if guys are looking to get wet down there. Like you said, not great, but hey man, if we can find a wave.
Absolutely. So Kurt, let's move a little bit north up the coast here, say a place like Virginia Beach or the Outer Banks. These type of systems can be pretty darn good for us. So is this going to be one of those that is really fruitful, or what's going on?
Yeah, this is a really interesting storm. We've seen a lot of these kind of similarly through history. I'm approaching 15 years of doing this, and I was thinking about all the strengthening systems moving through the Northwest Atlantic, and traditionally the forecast models, the swell models don't do a great job really with these rapidly strengthening systems as they move up into that section of the Northwest Atlantic. And, I would be willing to bet this is going to be another one of those. If we're heading from south to north, I'm looking at the southern part of the Outer Banks on Friday afternoon. You mentioned it down in the southeast. I think there'll be some mixed direction wind swell there. Winds will turn northwest in the second half of the day. And I think there could be some pretty fun surf down on the island to close out the work week on Friday. But then our attention really turns into this system as it bombs out south of Nova Scotia. I saw some of the most recent forecast models. I think, Mike, you mentioned this too, up to storm force. And I saw the OPC, the Ocean Prediction Center, was actually predicting potentially a hurricane force low up there in the Northwest Atlantic. That's all great. Fine. What does that mean for us for surf? Well, it'll set up a pretty solid shot of northeast and east swell from basically the Outer Banks up into parts of New England. A lot of spots, Saturday we'll see building swell as the system kind of strengthens. Looks like it'll build through the day. Conditions looking best to the spots that are more southerly facing. So we're looking at, say, southern New Jersey, but especially Long Island, some spots in Rhode Island, even some of the offshore islands in Massachusetts. We'll see some surf come together, even late in the day up into the Gulf of Maine. Outside of that, we're looking at pretty solid surf, especially for down here on the Outer Banks as we head into Sunday. A lot of times, though, with systems like this, that peak of the swell is really not what you want to target. We have it. Water temperatures right now in the northern Outer Banks are in the upper 40s. You don't necessarily want to be taking waves that are 2-3 feet overhead, double overhead. breaking out past the end of the piers. You don't want to take 8 or 10 of those on the head as you paddle out.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Kurt, because I'm from New Jersey, and we really never have the problem of a swell being too big there. So that was kind of a thing I had to adjust to while moving here, where, you see on the forecast models, I don't know, Lola might be forecasting like 8 feet at 11 seconds right now. In New Jersey, you'd be like, oh, it's going to be bombing. And here we're like, oh, it's going to be bombing. Dang it. It's just too much swell.
It's actually interesting. There's a lot of times on paper, you'll look at those and you think, oh man, it's going to be offshore light. Like you said, 8 or 11 or whatever. And it's just not very good. And a lot of times when that does happen, Virginia Beach will actually be, half the size of it here, but actually pretty fun. And, you'll see 100 people surfing First Street. So, which, by the way, we have a new cam there. Check that out.
So if I may ask, Kurt, if I've got a couple days off over the next 5 days, where am I going to go? Where's the best place to target if I'm in that VB Outer Banks area next few days? Where are the spots? Just so I can avoid, A, I don't want to have to surf those outer bars, and then B, I want to take advantage of maybe the downside of the swell.
Yeah, I mean, with arms like yours, I would think it would be no problem. You could just paddle out pretty quickly. But for the average man, such as myself, I'd be looking at, like I said, Friday afternoon down south, that Avon to Buxton stretch, even in the south-facing beaches. We got reports there that water temperatures along that stretch are actually in the upper 50s right now. So I would expect that to drop a little bit. But that combination with offshore winds is a pretty good one for Friday. Saturday along the stretch, most spots can be pretty much blown out. There could be some decreasing northerly winds late in the day for Virginia Beach. So you probably want to check the Croatan zone. It's a little bit of wind protection there Saturday, but for the most part, it's probably something I'd probably knock out the honey-do list and get a couple things done around the house or do some other chores to clear up the day on Sunday. Sunday during the morning, I'm looking at Virginia Beach. I think there should be some pretty fun waves there. Conditions should be pretty groomed out as some of the leftover wind swell will drop out or offshore winds will develop. And then midday and into the afternoon is when I'm going to start eyeing the Outer Banks, unless you're somebody like Brett. And then, Brett Barley's probably going to be out surfing all day on Sunday.
Yeah, he's looking at Sunday.
And then the average person, there'll be fun waves left over here on the Outer Banks into Monday as well. That we were kind of talking about how that might come down into our honey hole situation of, 4 feet or 3 to 4 feet or so at, a little bit lower period where our sandbars can really kind of goes past those outer bars and hits the inside where, we can kind of get some of those barrels and that sort of thing that we like around here.
Yeah, I find it really unique here how, the peak of a swell like this often is just, on paper it looks good, but it just ends up being a little bit too much. Once that swell fades a little bit, it'll be, say, that chest to head high zone is really the money zone for a lot of our sandbars to really manufacture some peaks and some barrels, and everyone loves chest to head high surf, I think. So
absolutely. And then, that brings a question though. So if I'm further up in the Northeast, say New York or New Jersey, sometimes we've got two vastly different stretches of coast, and I'm in that region. What are my best bets looking like over the next several days up that way?
Saturday for Long Island, looks like we'll see building east-east, southeast swell and offshore winds. So that looks like it'll build through the day. And then the winds turn sideshore there by Sunday. So Saturday is going to be your day for Long Island. If you're in New Jersey, southern New Jersey should see the best conditions on Saturday and the rising swell. And then it should be pretty fun leftovers with better winds across the whole state as we head into Sunday as that swell kind of eases down. But there should still be some pretty good size waves and fun surf. Again, probably in that chest, shoulder, even head high zone in the morning hours for New Jersey on Sunday.
Nice.
Yeah, and going back to that, how the swell models often don't do a great job on that. That's where we can really come in and offer a lot of value to our forecasts when we see these again and again, these Northwest Atlantic lows the models are just undervaluing them. And that's why Sunday for the Mid-Atlantic and even Monday for us down here, once the swell starts to ease, can really be that really fun surf.
Yep, that's a good point, Rob. I mean, the models are our guide, and it's a tool in our tool chest, but it is not ground truth. And I think I know a couple guys who'll be sampling some ground truth on Monday.
Oh, yeah.
Am I correct?
Yeah. So I guess our morning brief is going to be delayed. I guess we're going to be
might have to shift some meetings around. I think so. Yeah, that's the worst.
And not to be left out, but I always get cold every time I think up here. But it actually is one of the most beautiful areas that I love as well. But what about New England? It's very cold right now, and they're just getting ready to shake out a winter, but they going to see anything worthwhile, do you think?
Definitely. I mentioned a little while ago, I think Rhode Island Saturday is going to be the day as the swell fills in. And then if you're looking up towards Cape Cod, you're looking at more the Sunday time frame as the winds come around more westerly up into the Gulf of Maine. Maybe late in the day Saturday, but probably more of a Sunday event there as well. I'd keep an eye on the afternoon, though, Saturday, as winds may come around more out of the northwest and allow conditions to improve there. And again, we'll be kind of trending down Sunday and dropping into Monday. So definitely a window there as well. And I guess we'll circle back around and start kind of where we or end where we kind of started. And the kind of the impacts of this system in the Northwest Atlantic. Is it going to send anything back down to Florida? And then what about the Caribbean? Is there anything that's going to be in the water there? I know spring break for some people coming up.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting scenario. We've seen a few of these strong Northwest Atlantic storms this winter. Not a whole lot of them. This one looks pretty good as far as the swell production component goes for the Caribbean and Florida. We'll see northeast swell for Florida build in early next week, starting to come in around Sunday. Local winds really don't look ideal. You're going to have to stay tuned to the premium analysis for all the details as we kind of work through that over the weekend. I would eye North Florida as lightest winds during that time. That's kind of what happens when we see those ridges build down. Definitely stay tuned to your premium analysis for that.
And actually, it's probably a good point to mention that we've now broken up the North Florida region into two separate areas.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah,
and we broke that up to help the user, the Florida surfer, make a better decision, and they don't have to weed through all the info to get what they need. And so, we decided to break this down. The First Coast region, for those not familiar with the nomenclature in Florida, the First Coast identifies the area from the Florida-Georgia border through around Flagler Beach. And then the next section is Volusia County. We broke those two off to better communicate both the surf and impacts. We can, on a northeast swell like this, we can have quite a bit of a difference in size between an area like Jacksonville and somewhere like New Smyrna Beach. So it really helps us capture that and communicate that a little bit better to the user in there. So we've broken that out, and we hope it helps hope it helps you guys out there just a little bit easier to score some surf. As well.
Yeah, that is our job at Surfline here, help surfers score waves. And, any way we can communicate it a little bit better, that helps us too. So the last thing we'll go into is the Caribbean. When we have these big open ocean storms, there's going to be swell down there. The issue with this one is that its cold front may end up pushing into the islands. Of course, it won't sweep through all the islands. So looks like there's going to be a little bit of a hit or miss type swell event, at least for average spots, say the north coast of Puerto Rico. That'll be coming up. Swell will be coming up pretty strongly early next week. The issue, though, is once we see those post-frontal winds out of the northeast, a lot of spots just get trashed, and you're looking at only a select handful of spots or areas that can really maximize the swell and the wind combination. So once again, this isn't looking like the most ideal swell for the Caribbean, but there'll definitely be waves. And key spots are going to turn on. It's just not going to be one of those widespread events.
Right. And, a lot of times when we see this and these fronts come down there, a lot of times the swell arrives with those winds or just after. So like you're saying, not super ideal. There are some places to tuck away, but we really want those trades to lay down a bit to really maximize the potential there. But I'll say, if you're heading down there for spring break, there's not going to be a shortage of surf next week. We're just hoping those winds, waiting for those winds to straighten out to more typical east-northeast pattern.
Indeed.
I can say that I can think of an island or two that I'd like to be on here next week.
Yeah.
If I was going on spring break.
Yeah. One thing to point out with that and forecasting down this way quite a bit is, we've seen several fronts down this way. It was about a week and a half ago on a Sunday where we saw the front come down, and it came with south winds with a lot of north-facing spots along areas like Puerto Rico that turned on. Normally they're dealing with these trade winds, and so this isn't something that's unique to this season. We've seen several cold fronts make their way down here with some notable air mass changes, as noted by our spotter down there, reporter, and good friend Micah Weaver down at Rincon. So interesting scenario unfolding down there.
Gotcha. Well, I guess we'll wrap things up here. I'm Surfline lead forecaster Kirk Corte, and you've been listening to our new podcast. We're calling Forerunners, and this is the Atlantic version, which we will be issuing on Wednesdays here going forward. Today is Wednesday, March the 4th. We'll be issuing this every Wednesday here going forward, and the Pacific version will be available on Tuesdays every week. I'm joined with Rob Mitzcipher, Mike Watson. Fellas, any last remarks here?
Hey man, it's been a pleasure. This is my first podcast, so thanks for having me and being patient with me too, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Well, everyone have a good week. We'll see you next week.
Hey, and thanks for listening to the first Atlantic episode of Forerunners, the Surfline podcast. Many more podcasts are to follow, so be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss an episode. Just hit the red button below or the Surfline logo in the bottom right and let us know what you think in the comments. We might even answer back in a future podcast. For more detailed information on the surf of your local break, be sure to head to surfline.com for your full premium forecast analysis. If you're not a premium member yet, click on the icon in the bottom left for a free 15-day trial of Surfline that includes over 700 ad-free HD cams from around the globe, our famous 7-day colored forecast boxes, and our expert premium forecast analysis so you know before you go. Thanks again for listening.